During the most recent episode of Real Time with Bill Maher, Maher roasted and gently humiliated to her face the craziest Republican lawmaker, Nancy Mace. And I do mean the craziest, more than Lauren Boebert, Marjorie Taylor Greene, or even former Republican congresspeople like George Santos and Matt Gaetz. Nancy Mace is more unhinged than any of them. And she was on Bill Maher's show, and Maher called her out and the Republican Party's hypocrisy with respect to law and order and the weaponization of the Justice Department following the indictment of former FBI Director James Comey. And it's definitely worth watching, so we're going to talk about it. But before we do, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, full disclosure, I used to cover Nancy Mace because she was one of the few Republican lawmakers who would go into what I would call hostile territory and be challenged, like on CNN by Jake Tapper or by Charlemagne the God and The Daily Show, and apparently they went to school together. And obviously those sorts of interactions can be wildly entertaining and instructive. She has since lost full control of her mental faculties and has become just a total whack job, the likes of which we've simply never seen. Even other Republicans think she's crazy. She's like hemorrhaging staff in droves, and her ex-staff talk about how she's an attention seeker par excellence. She wanted to get punched in the face at a protest because she thought it would generate more attention. And so once I saw that she was this unprincipled grifter who cares only about attention, even by Republican standards, I stopped talking about her. But given that she's on Bill Maher, I'm like, okay, this is going to be interesting because there's a really good chance she'll just lose her shit, given that Bill Maher has a pretty good habit, pretty consistent habit of calling bullshit to Republicans to their faces on his own show. I'm actually surprised she kept it together, but yet the conversation is still worth addressing because it's very rare that these Republican hypocrites get called out to their face. So the whole thing lasts about 30 minutes, but here are a couple of clips, starting with this one. Embarrassing, even by Nancy Mace standards. She's stammering, she's stuttering, she's clearly insecure and out of her depth here. That's why I thought she would just get triggered and lose her shit, which is what typically happens when she gets pressed on issues that she's on the losing side of, which is almost all issues. But again, to her credit, she kept it together. Now, a couple of things worth noting here before we play the next clip. Number one, Chuck Schumer giving his opinion in 2016 about James Comey is wildly different than the President of the United States because, number two, Chuck Schumer was not in a position to prosecute James Comey because he's in the Senate. The Senate has no prosecutorial power and was not in a position, therefore, to deprive James Comey of his life and liberty the way that the executive branch can, number one. Number two, the allegation that Comey lied is bullshit, even as Smirkonish there, who's a relatively conservative, he calls himself independent, but he's basically center-right lawyer, host on CNN points out, no, we don't know that to be the case. And as a matter of fact, as we've discussed extensively yesterday, even some of the most conservative Fox News legal analysts and conservative legal analysts at the National Review and the Wall Street Journal, they're like, no, this is a slam dunk case that Comey did not lie, right? It has to do with whether or not conflicting testimony, allegedly conflicting testimony between James Comey and Andrew McCabe, in which Republicans are saying, James Comey pre-authorized a leak to the Wall Street Journal concerning the Hillary Clinton investigation back in 2016. But there's just no evidence of that. The evidence is that James Comey found out after McCabe leaked it to the press. If you find out something I did after the fact, you didn't authorize it by definition because you would have had to have known in advance and gave permission in advance. And there's no evidence that Comey did that. So again, you can just see her stuttered and stammering into silence because she doesn't know what the hell she's talking about, even though she's reflexively inclined to just defend Trump, right? It's part of the problem. I should say, for clarification, this is the part of the conversation that turned to Tom Homan. Tom Homan was interviewed a day before we found out that he was allegedly part of a bribe, that he received $50,000 in cash in a kava bag, as recorded by the FBI. Well, the day before that bombshell broke, he was actually on Bill Maher's show and was interviewed by Maher and didn't like that interview. Again, Bill Maher did press him at various points about how Homan is scaring the hell out of people, out of immigrants and American citizens and legal aliens, not undocumented immigrants, right? That he's just being unnecessarily cruel and capricious. I did appreciate that, but it was still, Maher was still too inclined to accept Homan's bullshit at face value, so I thought that was one of his weaker interviews, even though he did press him. And then the day after, the story broke about Homan. And so kudos to Maher. Maher brought it up. He's like, hey, if I'd have known about this the day I interviewed him, you bet your ass we would have talked about this. And so he dedicates part of the segment, this episode, to actually calling that out and grilling Nancy Mace about this, because he's like, hey, you talk about no one above the law. You talk about, being equal opportunity prosecutors. Sure seems like you're covering the ass of a staunch political ally. And according to Megyn Kelly, one of the biggest thought leaders in the right-wing movement, you all just don't care about right-wing corruption because. So I appreciate that he's just calling out on her bullshit because, look, is it true that Nancy Mace in the past has criticized Republicans? Yes, it's true, but it's very calculated. And note that her cope here, right, as she has become more staunchly MAGA as time has gone on and less inclined to deviate. The only thing where, again, I'll give her credit is she is deviating on the Epstein file. She's one of 4 Republicans to join a discharge petition orchestrated by Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna with respect to forcing the release of the Epstein files. So, again, credit to her there because that's a major political liability for Trump, which is why he's working so hard to prevent the Epstein files from being released. We'll see if she stays true to that. But in this episode, she indicates that she plans to continue to sign it. And she's expressing confidence that with the newly elected Democrat out of Arizona or Colorado, I keep getting them confused, that they will have the 218 signatures necessary. So, again, let's just see what happens. But note her cope right there. And again, you can tell she's visibly uncomfortable. She knows that this is bullshit. And she knows that if Bill Maher presses at all, she's gonna topple over like a house of cards because she's not going to be able to defend the proposition. But she's like, Kash Patel says it. Okay, well, Kash Patel, number one, we have no reason to trust him. Number two, he has an incentive to say that Tom Homan did nothing wrong because both Patel and Homan are part of the same administration, the same cultish administration, working under Donald Trump. So that's not proof of anything. If anything, you've just given us more reason to doubt the veracity of the claims, because what you would really need is somebody objective who is willing to defy Trump, who's willing to piss Trump off, who then says, yeah, this is bullshit. There's nothing to say here. But Kash Patel is not willing to do that. And so Kash Patel saying, oh, guys, nothing to see here. That doesn't cut it. And note how Nancy Mace knows, so, well, there's a tape. You haven't seen the tape. I haven't seen the tape. Well, then Nancy Mace should stand on principle and demand the release of the tape to verify whether or not Tom Homan accepted $50,000 as part of a cash bribe, which is what was alleged, right? And also note, as we discussed in previous videos, Homan didn't deny accepting the cash. He just says, I didn't do anything illegal. Okay, what the hell does that mean? So most of the episode, it's Bill Maher just gently but persistently trying to prod Nancy Mace into seeing reason. Of course, she's motivated to not see reason, so he doesn't make much progress. But I appreciated that once again, he has a Republican sitting across from him. They feel comfortable coming on, and he'll tell them to their face, like, come on, this is bullshit, right? This is obvious bullshit. This is hypocrisy. This is corruption. This is authoritarianism. And he does deliver a fairly blistering monologue towards Republicans in his new rules segment at the very end, which we may talk about in a separate video. But in the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.